and music to offer you. And spirits to offer you. And new love and music to offer you.
Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you live on Power Talk 1210. We are full-on extraterrestrial radio, streaming worldwide. Please go to powertalk1210.com, download the free app. It's the wave of the future. Put it on your iPhone and stream away. Listen to all of our live local shows, including Solomon on Blast and the Jake Feinberg Show, and we are honored to have you as part of the program today. And without further ado, I wanted to bring in one of the greatest poets in my lifetime, and a guy who has provided a lot of inspiration for my generation and others, speaking the truth and playing really, really funky, soulful piano and flute. Brian Jackson, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. It's so great to connect with you, brother. You know, I'm very much into the idea of music and magic. There's only two letters that separate the two. And I wanted you to talk a little bit to the audience about a story that was conveyed to you either by your teacher or your mom or your family about the spirits that came before you, that have come before all of us, and that will be here long after we're here, and the power of the spiritual quality of music. When you, if you could talk about a seminal moment in your early life when that occurred to you.
Well, I grew up listening to jazz. In my house, there was nothing but jazz all the time, with the exception of the occasional break for maybe some Bach or Brahms, Mendelssohn or the like. But I don't know if I actually realized it that early on that what was being done to me was that I was being inundated with tradition. It's something that I probably. The thing about that is that it's something that you're usually not taught verbally, but it's something that I think it has to grow on you. You have to understand at some point by being shown rather. And so what happened to me was that after having been immersed in so much tradition and so much music, I just began to understand, what it was about.
Could you specify it's fantastic, the kind of jazz that was being played for you? Was it Duke Ellington kind of stuff? Go ahead. Yeah.
So, it started, let me see, well, in the 50s, my folks were like full on they had passed the swing era, and they were like full on into bebop. So, in my house, I could be listening to Max Roach and Clifford Brown, or the next moment to Sarah Vaughan, Ahmad Jamal, Miles. This was the kind of stuff that was prevalent in my household. And I guess maybe even if I think about it, now that I think about it, the moment that I realized that this was all part of one kind of big tree, and that the roots were deep, and they went back across the sea to Africa, was when I started to understand the concept of the griot. And this is something that Gil and I used to talk about all the time, because we were always anxious to identify with our country, with our origin, being separated from our history of ourselves here in America was traumatic, and it was something that we had wished to, something that we had wished to rectify and maybe understand a little bit about. And as we began to investigate and learn about some of the traditions of West African culture, we came upon this concept of the griot, and I think it kind of all made sense at that point.
Can you, for the this is so awesome. For the lay person out there listening all over the world, can you talk about the customs of West Africa, specifically the griot, what was appealing to you about it, and how you incorporated it into your early music?
the griot was kind of a troubadour, but the kind of troubadour that spoke about things that were going on in the community, because ancient African culture was more or less a spoken culture. The lessons that were learned through music and dance and poetry, and so it was the griot's job to hold on to the stories and the histories of that particular nation, of that particular group of family, and it was a tradition that was passed on from generation to generation. So if you were born the child of a griot, you too were going to be a griot, and all of the things that had to be said, and all of the history, and all of the life and the cultures and the morals, the morality, and the customs of the people were going to be enclosed within the songs that the young griot, had to learn. He also was responsible for telling what was going on at the time, for breaking it down in a song. What's happening around us right now? There'd be a song about that, and that's what appealed to us the most, because we kind of saw ourselves as serving that function in some way.
I dig. No, I totally dig. Going back to your folks, though, did they? I just want to talk to you about the first time you went to South Africa. Did you go as a child, or when did you go with the band?
I didn't go until 1998.
Really?
And it was actually the first time that I had ever set foot in Africa. And it probably had more significance to me as a man in my 40s, as it would have been if I had gone earlier, because I had learned so much more, about the history of South Africa and the origins of the human race, having a lot of ties in South Africa. So when I got there, the first thing I did was I got on my knees and I kissed the ground.
I love it. I love it, man. I think you're right in the sense that it had more of an impact. It's funny because you were writing about it prolifically in 30 years prior, but maybe it would not have had the same kind of. But I want to go back to this tree you talked about. I mean, especially as it relates to the jazz. I mean, after the swing era into bebop, how were those cats? I mean, I was born in '78. I mean, I would have loved to have been part of that bebop scene. But how were those guys making sense of the family tree to Brian Jackson?
Well, a lot of the beat, especially bebop, in my estimation, was kind of a revolution. It was a revolutionary music. Bebop was saying to me, at least, what bebop spoke to me was that we are going to break all the norms. We're going to break out of all of the icons of the past, and we're going to move past them. We're going to use what is best from them, but we are going to develop them into something that speaks to us, and that allows us to express ourselves as young musicians. And so when that to me was the crux of bebop, was the core of bebop, and from there, so many different other types of jazz evolved, but they were all, at that point, I think they were all about moving consciousness forward.
Could you talk about specifically the rhythms of bebop? I connected a while ago with Big Black, the conga player, and and he's a dear friend, and I love him a lot. And he played with Dizzy. Was one of the first conga players to play bebop. And I wanted you to talk about the rhythms, because you talk about these, this revolutionary music, and I get it, but to specifically talk about the rhythms of Afro-American music in the 40s in the swing era versus how it changed with bebop.
Okay, so the rhythm in particular of the standard jazz, jazz rhythm that a drummer will play on the cymbals. As you know, most jazz is in 4/4 time, but the underlying rhythm of jazz of the standard swing jazz rhythm is 6/8, and this is so African that it's really hard to dissociate jazz jazz rhythms from African rhythms in that way. When I started to really understand that was when I started to listen to the djembe drumming of West Africa, of Senegal. It's there. The underlying 6/8 beat is transformed into a 4/4 beat. I'm not trying to get
no. Keep going. No, this is absolutely. Listen, you have no idea. Listen, this is what I'm about. This is exactly what keep going, man. It does. You're weaving gold right now, whether you know it or not. So just keep going.
So this is what I found, and it was really difficult to get away from it. And speaking about South Africa, once I got to South Africa, one of the things that really knocked me out is how they treat 6/8. So here was my lesson in free jazz, if you will, I guess, or a polyrhythm.
Right.
Because as I was listening to these guys, they were doing a lot of South African jazz musicians. Of course, one of the core rhythms of South African music is 6/8. And so as I was listening to these 6/8, and I thought, hey, I know 6/8. I'm all about it. And when I heard these guys playing it, at some point, I just completely lost where the one was.
You're right.
I had no idea where the one was. I went back to them after the show, and I said, okay, that was really beautiful, but I just have to ask you something. I said, how are you able to keep the one? I mean, how do you find the one? And like the bass player laughed at me and he said, we don't. He said, we don't. He said, we just let it go where it goes. We'll catch it. It'll catch us.
It'll catch us. Can you, it's amazing how infectious that became in the, with Western psychedelic jam bands, because it's like any note can be the one, and this is the kind of
exactly.
I don't like people getting so hung up on always knowing where the one is. I mean, there's such an emphasis on that. Here it is. We'll catch it, but somehow
we'll catch it.
But you have to have your chops together, because the truth is, it would just be a mess if you didn't know what you were doing. I mean, you have to be gifted, but it was a mind blower for you. It really was.
It was a mind blow. It was a mind blow, because I figured, okay, you know what? It's me. But it's not me, and if I had been up there, and if I had been up there playing it, somebody could have said that to me, and I would have said the same thing. It's just that having been an observer, it was a mind blow, because I mean, it's happened to me a gazillion times, and I never think about it in those terms. I always thought of, well, okay, I just screwed up, I can't find it anymore. But what they taught me is that you didn't screw up and you didn't lose it. It's there. It's doing its thing.
It'll just come back around again.
It'll come back to you.
As a non-musician, I get off on this as much as, I just think I'll talk to everybody about this from now on. I think it's the most intoxicating thing. But when
I would love to hear some of the answers.
Well, but people will say, and I've just sort of started to unpack all this, but they'll say, whether it was a audio and visual experience, like when you saw in Senegal, or somebody who was actually playing with somebody else, they all say, this is the player I was before that, and this is the player I am now. I mean, it fundamentally changes you as a musician as well, I think. I mean, that's once you realize that it's not you, that it's just part of the groove. I think that's really...
Absolutely.
But Brian, I wanted to ask you about, part of my show is steeped in sociology, and really I started my show maybe five years ago because I'm a huge fan of Barack Obama, and I think that he's been everybody's favorite person to take cheap shots at, but I think he's done an incredible job, and I really respect him a lot. And I was even appalled 5 years ago at how he was being treated. And to me, it just came down to a cultural bias. Other people would refer
absolutely.
And I talked to Richard Davis. I veered off when I started my show. I was doing stuff on education and immigration, stuff that's related to Southern Arizona, and it just kind of got soulless really quickly. And I started to reach into these vinyl records I had and pull out these heroes of mine. And I started to interview all these cats. And Richard Davis talked about something called, he referred to a covert versus overt racism, and the idea that in today's society things are much more covert as opposed to and I want you to talk about it as somebody who grew up in Bed-Stuy and in New York. You had to face a lot of overt racism, cultural bias. I wanted you to talk about how you specifically handled it, and also your thoughts on Barack Obama as his legacy, how you view him as a president as well, if you're proud of him.
Okay, so let me first talk about one thing that my grandparents used to say to me. Even though I'm like a third generation New Yorker. My grandparents grew part of the time lived in the South before they migrated to Harlem. And we used to have conversations about that covert and overt racism that you refer to, and they always seem to, at the end of the conversation, someone would always blurt out, "You know what? In some ways, I prefer living in the South." And everybody would say, and everybody would understand what that means. And what it means is that sometimes it's better for somebody to stand in front of you with a knife,
That's right,
with a sneer on their face, and smile at you, and as soon as you pass by, turn around and stab you in your back.
That's right.
It's like, I'd rather know how you feel. I'd rather you be honest with me about where we are in our relationship, than to make me feel that everything is cool, and now I can't understand why everything is going wrong in my life whenever I deal with you.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. I remember Richard talking about as a bass player trying out for classical symphonies, and they'd have a drape, so you couldn't see who the musician was. You couldn't see what color they were, but yet even though he was head and shoulders above everybody else, he never got a call back. Anyway, so much. I guess what you're saying is the East Coast, in the eastern part, Northwest, Midwest, it's more covert, whereas in the South they wear it on their sleeve like a badge of honor, and they'll get in your face about it.
That's right. I mean, I grew up. Let me see. I was in the 4th grade when they started busing.
Right.
Okay, and they bused me across town. I was living in Crown Heights. I was already living in a mostly Jewish neighborhood, and then they bused me across town to another mostly Jewish neighborhood. So I'm not really sure what the benefit was there.
Right.
But I do know that the school, even though the school was changing, where I lived in Crown Heights. The school that I went to was becoming more culturally diverse. And that was cool. I mean, I was happy with that. I didn't really need to go anywhere for that, although the facilities might have been better. I'm not sure. But anyway, they bused me across the borough to Brooklyn Heights. I'm sorry, not Brooklyn Heights, to Ditmas Park. Okay, and so I spent most of my elementary school years in Ditmas Park. Did I feel Unwelcome? Yeah, I did. I did, because there was there was a busload of us, and we would get out, and it was a strange environment for us to be in. I felt mostly comfortable there, to be honest. But I know that whenever there was conflict, and as you're always when you're a kid, you're always going to have conflict with some other kids. You're always going to have a problem with somebody down the line. And as soon as you got into a problem with one of the white kids, then that's when the race thing would always come up.
What do you mean by would be brought up? I mean, within the verbal altercation, or
it's just like, well, I don't like you anyway, you nigger, or
right.
Whatever. That's when, or even if that word wasn't used, there was always some type of a slur, a racial slur to let you know that, okay, well, I don't like you, and I also don't like the fact that you're black. That was the message. That was the message. And even though it didn't happen that much, it happened enough to make me feel like, okay, you know what? This is not really my. This is not my.
So much for busing. I'll tell you, unbelievable.
But, yeah, the kids from Holy Innocents High School, which was a boys' Catholic school, used to come specifically to fight us. The kids in the bus.
Oh my God, Jesus.
Yeah, he's like they're like a kind of Brooklyn lynch party, But I guess it all stopped when one of the bad kids on the bus stabbed the leader of their little gang with a compass.
Yeah, that right out of the West Side Story thing. I mean, it's
yes.
That put it in. Go ahead.
It seemed like there was a lot more acceptance after that. I'm not. I don't condone violence. I just want to say.
No. I mean, unfortunately, I guess I also want to know. I mean, I am not a practicing. I have a very Jewish name, but I'm not a practicing Jew, and I was never bar mitzvah or anything like that. But did you feel that were Jewish people fake to you? Your face, were they covert, or were they very welcoming? I mean, the Jewish people have been oppressed, obviously, as well. But I'm just curious if you could. No,
I never. Yeah. I really didn't. I didn't feel that. I mean, where I would feel it, where you would feel that tension would be when it came to real estate.
Sure.
When it came to where you actually.
I could totally see
you actually live.
Right.
But aside from that, two kids, a Jewish kid, a black kid, it was fine.
Right. Just if you were moving in next door, then it would get a little tense. Yeah.
Then it'd be a problem. Yeah.
I love it. Talking to Brian Jackson here on the Jake Feinberg Show, live here on Power Talk 1210. If you could, I couldn't ask a better person, because you were one of the main cats that you're right in there with Donny Hathaway and Curtis Mayfield, and
wow,
in the sense of
you mean I was there?
No, I want to say no.
I was present.
Well, no, your messages might have been slightly different, but you were from. Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to get at is these communities. The ghettos, if you want to call them that, or whatever they were, whatever the neighborhoods, the messages coming out of the Afro-American neighborhoods that were being spoken by Marvin Gaye, who was a little bit ahead of that, but Curtis and Gil Scott and Brian Jackson and Donnie and I don't want to leave. I'm going to leave people out, obviously, but it was love.
It was too many.
It was love. I mean, it was love. It was like we are all brothers. Like it was truth, but it was very powerful, healing music, as opposed to this what's become of rap music or hip hop, which is just really angry. And I'm not making a statement.
I'm really glad you said that.
I just want you to say, tell me, explain to the audience around the world, because you'll see these little generalizations or stereotypes, but how come the messages, albeit in a more overt racist society, have become that much more angry and volatile in a more covert racist society?
Wow. That's interesting, because one of the things that you mentioned, one of the things that you just touched upon, is something that I would like to clarify about
Yeah, go ahead.
and
Go
my
ahead.
music.
Yeah.
Okay, because a lot of people then, and some even now, will say that Gil was an angry poet, an angry black poet, and that our music was very political and
divisive, right?
Divisive, and and just full of anger, almost as though almost as though we sat around all day like with frowns on our faces, and just thought about we're gonna write this song, and we're just gonna downgrade everybody, we're just gonna call everybody a bunch of names, and, and show people that everybody should be hated, and we just felt like that. That is not the legacy that I would like us to have, because I did say at one point, and Gil used to say this too, that when we had the option, when we had the choice of writing songs, that we just decided that we weren't going to write songs about "Ooh baby, I love you," "Ooh baby, let me get into your pants," and this kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Because there was already enough of that. We weren't the ones who were going to write some more love songs. But the funny thing, the ironic thing about it is, when I listen to our music now, they are love songs, man.
I couldn't agree. Well, I think it's just so beautifully put. Plus, I mean, I mean, from looking at it from my optics, it's like a lot of the stuff we'll listen to a track in a little while. I mean, it's what happened. It's truth. It's stories. It's not made up stuff. I mean, it's real events. But
exactly.
I mean, some of the songs. Your daddy loves you. I mean,
exactly.
Listen, man. I mean,
exactly.
as a father, you have no idea. As a father of two young daughters, that's one of the most touching, beautiful, lilting songs in the world. I mean, if anything, your music was just like the funkiest, soulful music of all time. But I don't know.
Thank you.
And so
also,
yeah. Go ahead.
The song you just played, the song that you played at the beginning of the show,
yeah.
Offering.
Yeah, sure.
Another example. It was all about opening ourselves up, opening up our spirits, so that we can have some type of a communion. And particularly our shows were all about that. It was about having a mutual experience, actually a communion. So that we could all kind of, because this is the thing. This was the thing that was dividing us, and there are very few things in the world that can unite people like music. And so we were about healing, man, and that we weren't about hatred and anger.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm seeing. Like I'm seeing people strap bombs to themselves and go into mosques and blow people up and dip people, and yet you're offering. You say we have something to offer you. It's music. It's a spiritual communion. Can you talk about a transcendent moment on the bandstand when you saw this power of music, the unity power of music? I think it's just the specificity of this is important, because, I mean, most of my generation and future, obviously my kids, they're used to a whole different entertainment system with a whole bunch of stimuli that has nothing to do with why you're actually there. So I really would just love you to talk about some kind of experience with Gil in that band when that spiritual communion occurred.
It happened every night, man.
That's insane. Yeah, I knew you were going to say. Yeah, I know.
It happened every damn night.
Wow.
Yeah, I can't even specify one, because it happened every time we got together to play music. And it not only did it happen among us, the musicians, but it happened among everyone who was present.
Absolutely. No, that's what I to me, that's like a decade almost worth of getting off of having that kind of communion. What was going back to, did you get to see Coltrane live?
Oh man, I didn't get a chance to see Coltrane. I got a chance to see Miles when I was like 16. My father's best friend took me and my boy Ronaldo, who played trumpet, to go see Miles at the at the Carnet Club in Brooklyn on Franklin Avenue, and I was sitting. I had to be sitting maybe about 10 feet maybe at the most, sitting like I was in the front row. There was hardly anybody there, and it was Miles and Wayne Shorter and Chick Corea was on piano. Dave Holland on bass, and Jack DeJohnette on drums.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah. And it was like I think it was kind of like right around the period that they had released Nefertiti, Miles in the Sky.
Absolutely.
Miles in the Sky. So we were all there, and you know how Miles always likes to do these little musical quotes. You know, and that's a lot of musicians do that. You know, I think it's something that actually really really took hold in the bebop era. But I know that even swing guys used to do that. But it was something that Miles used to love to do, was like to quote other pieces musically in his solos. And almost every time he did it, my boy Ronaldo and I would laugh. Because it's like it's kind of a musical joke, you know, and we would laugh. And I remember at one point, you know, these two 16-year-olds, first of all, what the hell are we doing in there? You know what I mean? And I remember one point, you know, Miles was like standing off the side of the stage when somebody else was soloing, and he started, you know, all of a sudden I looked up and he was like staring right at us.
Oh man, you know? I love it.
And I think he was just like, I could see in his mind him thinking, who the hell are these kids? You know?
Yeah, but I mean, I know for a fact, like, even in San Francisco, they had something called the Peanut Gallery, where, like, you know, cats your age at that time could go in. You could sit behind a rope wire, have a Coke, order a Coke. You know, as long as you weren't drinking alcohol, but you could go in and access it. But this musical quoting? You said it. You're pretty convinced it came out of the swing era, but it was very prevalent in the bebop era. Like, do you know? Like, was Miles quoting? Like Broadway tunes? What was something that you remember him quoting at that time, like in the middle of some sort of frenzied jam?
Yeah. There was this one when he always used to quote. I can't. Who was that? I can't remember. But there were so many of them, and they all used to do it. Wayne used to do it. Chick used to do it. I mean, they would quote classical pieces. They would quote other jazz songs. They would quote nursery rhymes. You know, whatever it is that came to their mind, it would just come to them, and it would just always fit in to whatever they were doing. And unless you were really, really paying attention, you would even miss it.
I dig that.
And I'm sure I missed it. I'm sure I missed it more times than I caught it.
I mean, I only asked about Train because when I interviewed Jimmy Cobb was playing with John in the early '60s, kind of like when he was beginning. When he was
that was the Miles era,
like getting into very modal, like doing all these thesauruses of rhythms and scale, all this craziness, and
Nicholas Slanimsky, the book,
right, and he, I mean, Jimmy said that women in the audience would get up when Train was going. They're like, make him stop playing. This is and then you had like white cats, journalists writing and calling it hate music.
It's crap. Yeah, it's crap. And that was another one. They always used to call Miles the angry tenor. You know, not Miles. Coltrane. They always used to say, you know, Coltrane was one of those angry tenors, like him and Sonny Rollins. You know, I think they were, and who else? There was one more, Shep. I think they were all considered angry tenors. What the hell?
I mean, they're expressing their stories and their feelings and their emotions. Somehow that makes them angry. Yet it's. Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of it, though. Do you remember there was the Chicago? There were these. Well, I guess it's a larger question about really African American journalists and media paying attention to its own cultural heritage to push back against some of this garbage. Were there I guess my question is, were there cats were there journalists that used to give you and Gil good publicity in the local rags? I remember talking to Ron Carter, and he would talk about the Pittsburgh Courier or the Chicago Navigator. There were these black sort of publications that would highlight some of this incredible music. Did you have any friendly journalists that used to really promote your music?
Not that I.
Oh man, that's unbelievable! Unbelievable.
No, I mean, no. Like Robert Christgau was very kind to us.
Who was he? Who was that guy?
Robert Christgau wrote for Rolling Stone.
Okay.
And I in retrospect, having looked at some of those reviews, it seemed like he kind of got it in a way. But I think a lot of people didn't consider it serious. Because of the fact that we were accepted kind of in the pop genre. I mean, it was very strange to see how our music was categorized. You couldn't. Part of the reason we might have sold a lot more records if people had known where to find us in the record store.
Yeah,
you could go to, in some places we were in the pop section, in some places we were in the rock section, other places we were in the jazz section, and then some other places we were in the R&B section. So nobody could actually. That was one of the triumphs to me of our music, the fact that nobody actually knew how to categorize it.
Well, and actually that's really what I mean. Jazz, truthfully, is a blending of all music. So I mean, it's kind of it's a tribute, and then like the Duke Ellington School, where it's just all music. It's either good or bad. In your case, it was
either good or bad. I'd kind of like to
go ahead.
Put my own spin on that. When it comes to Duke, Duke said there are only two kinds of music: good music and bad music, and I kind of paraphrase that to say there are only two types of music you like and music you don't like.
That's even better.
Because good and bad is such a subjective thing, that something that might be good for you might not be good for somebody else. We were just talking about that. We were just talking about Coltrane and how many people would listen to it and hear nothing but garbage, and how other people would hear it and it would transform their entire lives.
I mean, if you really look at it, the people that misunderstood it, mischaracterized it, didn't understand it, treated it like hate music, those were the seedlings for the pacification of music. I mean, it really, in many ways, because music was all about feeling when you guys were around. It was about how to feel the music. And now we're really in a rut, in my mind, where there's still cats around, but
yes,
there are. But it was prevalent when you were coming of age. I got a track of music to play for Brian Jackson here. We'll come back and then we'll break it down. Okay.
Okay.
Just 30 miles from Detroit stands a giant power station. It ticks each night as the city sleeps, seconds from annihilation. But no one stopped to think about the people or how they would survive. And we almost lost Detroit this time. How would we ever get over losing our mind? The sheriff of Monroe County had sure enough disasters on his mind. And what would Karen Silkwood say to you if she was still alive? That when it comes to people's safety, money wins out every time.
Music on the Jake Feinberg Show, brought to you by the Circle Tree Ranch, the Stereo Hospital, the Jewish Community Center of Southern Arizona, and Abbott Taylor Jewelers. And we thank them for their support. All right, Mr. Jackson, what do you got for us, brother? You there, sir? Did he think that was the end of the interview? We better call him back.
No, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, dude. Yeah, so go. I mean, we almost lost Detroit. The more things change, the more they remain the same. In the sense that, I wanted you to talk about that. That was cut in 1977 on an album called Bridges. We almost lost Detroit. But I also want you to talk about it in modern times because we're dealing with a situation in Flint, Michigan, with the lead levels being at this level. I mean, where you're going to see this. This is going to have ramifications for generations. And it almost seemed, it is. I mean, there's almost it's either apathy or the response from local leadership or regional leadership is, well, whatever, it's just a dying community anyway. It's just a black community. And I wanted you to talk about that song that you guys put together and what's happening in Flint now.
So, the thing is, there's one line in the whole song that really, if you don't get any other line in the song, the rest of it is a narrative about what happened, and it's based on the book We Almost Lost Detroit. But there is one line in the song that if you don't hear any others, just remember this. The line is, when it comes to safety, money wins out every time.
That's what exactly. That hits home. That is as relevant today as it was. When was the book written?
1976, I believe.
Yeah.
Let me see. I'm checking.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, can you talk? Go ahead. I mean, I think I want to talk about why that line. I mean, it might seem self-evident, but why is that line? Why is that line so salient?
1975 by John G. Fuller. Yeah. So why is that line relevant?
Why is it so salient if there's only one line?
Why is it so salient?
Yeah. Why is it if there's one line for people to get? Why is it that way?
Yeah. Because this is the thing. Okay, there are a lot of safety issues in our world, in our environment. We're looking at massive environmental issues that have already started, but it's just the tip of the iceberg, if you pardon my pun.
Sure, that's right.
It's coming. It's coming in waves, and it's not going to stop. And we have people who are downgrading it and trying to say that it doesn't exist. Well, do you think they really believe that? Maybe some of them do. I think that the ones who are actually involved in creating the problem know better. But then ask me, do they care? No,
right. Because
they're at an age right now where when all of this excrement hits the air conditioner, all right, they'll be gone. Forget about the fact that they have kids or that they have grandkids or that they'll have great-grandkids. Forget about that. To them, that is irrelevant because they will be dead and buried. Okay? But why? What is the purpose? I mean, why would they do this? Because while they're alive, they're making tons and tons of money. They're living a good life based on the future of suffering of the whole of the entire global community. But they don't care because right now they're having the time of their lives. They're having a ball, and that's what matters. So anybody who is making profit off of illness and off of death they're doing it because it lines their pockets. I mean, there's no other way to say it. If they were, let's put it this way, if the healthy alternatives were more profitable, they would be doing that.
Exactly. I wanted to, there's a couple things that popped into my head. Also, we haven't gotten back to why the rap generation is so much, the messages are so much angrier. I really want you to address that. But were there cats that you know, that the upstanding cats who walked, that you knew in professional life, that might have been in, oil and gas, or that might have been in major corporations, that walked away because they knew that? I mean, when you say that it's just the tip of the iceberg, and that, I'm with you, man. It seems it's definitely stark. It's definitely real. And I think a lot of people know it is real, but they can't wrap their head around the fact that their profits, that their ability to create this material life for themselves is at the expense of civilization. That they could never accept that. But were there
And you know what?
Yeah.
And it's not just on them either. Because we all benefit. We all benefit from these things. We all benefit from oil. You know what I mean? We all benefit from petroleum products. So I mean, it's us too. We can't totally blame them, because if we all were just to say, hey, you know what? Enough of this. We're not dealing with this anymore. You guys figure out a way, or you're out of business.
It's absolutely true. Were there any people in public life that you and Gil used to connect with, either politically or just on a social level? Not just cats who would come to the shows, but guys who literally walk the walk.
No, I can't say.
I love it. I love it. All right, here's a question.
Clive Davis.
Well, I mean, listen, and that dude. I mean, as I've continued to burrow in deeper and deeper to 500, 600 plus interviews, nobody's.
Wow.
We're all. Yeah, I mean, we're all human beings. Clive is not innocent either, except the one thing that was consistent about Gil Scott-Heron and Brian Jackson is that you were on Air stuff for many years. It was and we can break that down. I just wanted to ask you when you met Gil at what is it, Liberty? What was it?
Lincoln
University.
University. Yeah.
Okay. Could you talk about an instance when you guys, Phyllis, you were having a hard time between each other, faced a little bit of adversity as far as maybe egos were concerned, how you overcame it, and how it made you guys a stronger team?
That's a really good question, because it's an issue that it didn't come up too often. I mean, Gil had a very strong personality. He was very outspoken, and some people might say that he was arrogant. And that I wouldn't necessarily argue. I wouldn't necessarily argue with him about that. But Gil could also be a very kind person and a very real person, and just like, I think that some of the pressures of being Gil Scott-Heron, I think, eventually kind of made him resentful of the role that people had given him, which is something that he himself did not intentionally assume.
Could you give an example?
Okay, well, I'll give you a great example. When Bush was elected president, Bush the second was elected president, I would see people tweeting, George Bush is now, the second George Bush is now president. Can't wait to hear what Gil has to say about it. I mean, really? You have to wait? You have to wait for Gil Scott-Heron to say what is wrong with that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
And people would always ask him, so what do you think about the Iraq war? Or what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? And the answers were so obvious that you didn't really need anybody to tell you that. Nevertheless, they wanted him to say it. They wanted him to say it in his way, and in the way that was entertaining, and made it. He was able to put all of these things almost into the size of a sound bite that you could carry around with you. And okay, I get it. That's a good, that's kind of good in a way, but not if you're not going to think yourself, and not if that precludes the idea of you having dialogue with other people about it. because that is what has to happen. We have to dialogue about these things. We have to come together about these things, not just have somebody say something really ironic and funny about it so that it amuses you, and then that's it, and that's all you do.
Could you?
Yeah, I mean, you go to a show, and then all of a sudden, you go to a show, and he breaks down everything that's going on in the world. You're like, oh yeah, man, that's it. Wow, yeah, and then plus it's funny too, And then you go home, and that's it. That's not going to change anything.
It's going to take me a minute.
It's not his fault if it doesn't.
Well, I mean, this is so important. I'm going to have to go back. Like, I'll listen to this 3 or 4 times, and I'm going to have to wrap my head around that. That's intense, and it's true. But going back to you and Gil specifically, early on, how did you guys become such a good team? I feel like, that, I mean, on the surface at least, obviously you disbanded, I think 1980, but
yeah,
I mean,
79,
79, but I mean, how did you guys work as a team so well? Could you talk about, those qualities?
Well, we were best friends. We were best friends. We were always hanging out, and that basically our friendship was the backdrop of what we created, of the music that we created. I don't think we could have ever written the kind of music that we wrote together if we weren't hanging together all the time, and we weren't talking together all the time about the things that we were seeing and amazed about how similar our perspectives were on things. And that was the basis of that was the basis of the music that we did. It was our friendship, and it was the conversations and the dialogues that we had that kind of shaped the way things went musically.
Were you was that like evident right away when you met at college?
Instant.
Well,
yeah, I mean, pretty much. I mean, like, Gil played a song, and I didn't think, I thought, well, okay, the music is kind of cool, it's basic, but I dig it. But what really got to me were the lyrics.
Right.
And I was thinking, I've never heard anybody write lyrics like this before. And I played a song, and I just could see on his face that he was thinking, oh, wow, I've never, this guy can play.
Yeah.
This guy can play. This guy, not only can he play, but he can play some stuff that I want to write music, that I want to write lyrics to. And that was it. I mean, we were both looking for that other aspect to complete our musical communication, the communication or the things that we wanted to say. So we became friends. We became friends immediately. There were a lot of older guys in school at Lincoln University who would just sit us down. It was their job to like turn us on to music and ideas that we didn't know about. And some of them ended up being in our band.
Who was? I mean, I need to talk.
One of them in particular.
Who? Because I am. Listen. I mean, people, of course, they're like Pieces of a Man. Ron Carter played bass. Of course, they're going to give Ron Carter but your bands had some of the most unsung cats. I am determined. Tell me some of those. Tell me the cats you met at Lincoln, or at least one of them, the graybeard, so to speak.
Well, Danny Bowens was the initial bass player, the original bass player for the Midnight Band.
He was on Pieces of a Man, or he was on Pieces of a Man, wasn't he?
No. Danny came around at Winter in America.
Got it.
So Danny Bowens and Bob Adams, they were both schoolmates of ours. They were in the same grade as I was, I think. And when we went off. I went off because I didn't finish at that time. I didn't do it yet. So I went back to New York after I got kicked out, and then I went to Baltimore. I went to Baltimore to hang out with Gil, who was going to school at Johns Hopkins. He was actually teaching there, and that's when we started writing a lot of the stuff, the music to Winter in America. And we had basically conceived of it as a duo album, just him and me doing doing the songs that we had written. And actually, a lot of it is like that. I mean, you mentioned Your Daddy Loved You. That's basically just me and him. And there were a lot of other songs like that. But then there were some other songs where we felt like, you know what, this could be really a lot stronger if we had some drums and bass. Well, you know, we weren't Bob Thiel, and we didn't have the money or the contacts to hire Ron Carter back or Bernard Purdy. So we said, hey, well, who do we know to play drums and bass? It was our friends at Lincoln who we had a band with called the Black and Blues.
Oh boy,
Bob and Danny were. Yeah,
oh man. So where is Lincoln exactly? I mean, I picture it somewhere out in in the woods, but was it near a city?
You're right.
Yeah,
you're right. It is in the woods. It's 52 miles southeast of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Where were the gigs for the Black and Blues band? I need to know some of these. Where were you guys? I want to know some of these gigs that you guys had out there, man, because there were this wasn't Baltimore. This wasn't like urban area. This was like woods.
Well, we played. Let me see. We didn't get a chance to play much.
Really? Okay.
We didn't. We played at. We played at school.
Sure.
We did a lot of gigs at school, but our first real gig was in Montclair, New Jersey, at a place called the Stirrington House. And so that was a momentous day.
Wow.
for Gil, me, and the band. It was the first time we had ever been to a club to play, and it was pretty close to New York too. So we were stoked. And we also would play at some of the colleges around town, that were near Lincoln, University.
Which colleges would you play? You like UPenn or where would you play?
Cheney State was one of them.
Sure.
Cheney State. Yeah, we did get to you see, would you say what? Where?
I mean, this is in the sticks, man. I mean, this is mine. Wait, so you're telling, because I mean, when, like, you're telling me that Clive, like you were on Arista at the time, but Clive wasn't.
Not yet.
No. I'm sorry. I jumped back to what you were talking about when Gil was at Johns Hopkins and you were cutting Winter in America.
Yeah,
and
that's right. Yeah, we did that on our own. We took $4,000 of our money.
Oh.
And I actually don't know, how did we get $4,000? Oh, I guess it must have been. It was probably from the publishing money, and no, not the publishing money. The writers' royalties from
sure.
from Pieces of a Man and Free Will.
I mean, you have to excuse me, but so Winter in America was private. You cut that privately? Wasn't on Arista?
No. Actually, the next album was our first Arista album, but.
Thanks for setting me straight. Yeah, I know that at first.
Winter in America. We decided that we figured we watched Bob Thiel sitting around in the studio smoking a pipe, and we could, and. We didn't know. What do we know?
Yeah, I love it.
What do we know?
Yeah.
We look at him and we think, naively, we think, oh, is that all he does? We can do that.
Right.
So we decided we could do it, without the pipe. And so we went to Silver Spring, Maryland, and we found this guy named Jose Williams, who was an engineer, and he had a great studio there. And so we decided we put down roots, and we went in there and we started cutting the album. And we then found a label that just so happened to open up here in New York called Strata East, which was a musician-run label.
I interviewed Stanley Cowell a couple months ago.
Stanley Cowell
there you go.
He was the founder.
Absolutely.
He was the founder of that. And Dick Griffin. And they told us what the deal was, and the deal sounded really good. Basically, you cut the album, they put it out, and you get 85% of the profit.
Deal.
And we thought, well, this is the kind of thing we could go for. This sounds like musicians being treated fairly. And we put it out, and the song "The Bottle" happened to be on there, which changed the game. It changed the game completely because being just a small label, they weren't able to meet the demand of all of the places, all of the retail outlets that were looking to stock our album just for this one song. And so this is what attracted Clyde. You know, this is what got Clive Davis's attention, and so
you're filling in. I love your filling in the blanks. So, I mean, what did that look like? Because it wasn't like, I mean, radio stations could access. Actually, it must have been very hard to get all that quantity out there. It was.
I mean,
wow.
We had actually at some point, it was so overwhelming to them that we actually started ordering boxes to keep in our kitchen. So we would have stacks of boxes of records in our kitchen next to the phone on the wall. And whenever a retailer would call and say, I need 50, I need a box of the bottle, then we'd get their address and then we'd go and we'd send them out.
Do you feel? I'm asking this as a journalist, but also, have you received all the proper royalties from that album? Because even Pieces of a Man, you mentioned Bob Thiel, who, I mean, the guy was doing Impulse stuff, and as far as I'm concerned, he disseminated a lot of amazing music. But even Pieces of a Man came out on Flying Dutchman at one point. I mean, I've had presses on Flying Dutchman of that, which was an offshoot of his.
That's right.
And so, I mean, did you? I mean, even though at the time you're young, you must have just been laughing, having a ball that this was exploding like that. But have you recouped? Have you been able to monetize all the bottle stuff that in a fair way? Have you been treated fairly in a monetary sense?
Well, there would have been nobody actually to treat us fairly except ourselves.
But I mean,
because we did it,
right?
Because we did the album,
wow. And
even though we were really young, we had a lot of people in our ear, a lot of older guys in our ear telling us something that. Now, I mean, almost every young person, I think, knows this. Every young artist knows this. But at the time, there were a lot of stories about writers who died penniless, even if they had great hits. So the older guys would always tell us, you know what, this is great. You guys are playing. You guys have songs out here right now, and must be a blast to hear them on the radio. But listen to me right now. This is the word that you need to hear: publishing. Make sure you have your publishing. Okay, if you have your publishing, that means you own the copyrights to your music. And if you own the copyrights to your music, anybody that uses that music has to pay you for that privilege. Okay? They used to drill it in our ear. They used to drill it over and over to us every time. They were like, you know what? It's great to hear your stuff on the radio, but you ain't getting paid from that, really. That's not where you're going to get the most of your money. And when they stop playing your music, what are you going to do then? Because you've chosen this as a career now. You've chosen this so it's kind of a job. So you have to take it, and it's also your music is your product, and it's an investment. So make sure that you are able to use your product to survive.
Well, I mean, there's so much. Can you highlight some of these sages that you and Gil had, even if they're not known in the mainstream? I guess that was my initial question that I forgot to ask you about, was that I interviewed Lester Chambers from the Chambers Brothers. A while ago. Just one of the baddest cats around, and
one of the baddest cats around.
Baddest cats, and you want to talk about somebody who got ripped? Literally, incredible situation. Talking exactly about what happened with you guys, in a sense, different from you, because he didn't. It was part of it had to do with his brothers, but he was talking about beatniks. That was the word for the cats that would go down to the beaches in Southern California, play drums on the beach. He was playing the front of a car. He would learn rhythms. Can you talk about some of the Afro-American poets and writers that you specifically loved and would be, maybe they were considered beatniks in the 50s?
Well, I think that the man who was known then as Leroy Jones, who became Amiri Baraka, could have been considered one of them. And even though, for instance, Langston Hughes came from a slightly earlier time, I'm sure that he could also be considered as one of the founders of beat music. And to me, my understanding of beat music is really that it's rhythmic, that it's a way of rhyming that coincides with the rhythms, with popular rhythms and dance music. How about that?
I dig. Well, I mean,
how about that? That's something new, isn't it?
Well, well, the thing is that Lester considers himself a beatnik. I mean, the guy he said that was a better word than a hippie, But I mean, that was what. To me, it was. You guys were a lot of cats were inspired by that beat generation. What they were just that free expression and the ability to say. I mean, even what you said before. You said. In those older cats were telling you, I mean, this is kind of, you said it's kind of a profession now after you had that hit.
That's right.
But at the same time, when you wrote that song, you guys were just trying to express the idea of what's really happening in your life and how you can live a different kind of life than the way society says you should live your life. And to me, it's really important. Brian, we've just been cooking for like 70 minutes here. I would love to do part 2 with you sometime in the summer if possible.
Be my pleasure.
Yeah, I really had a ball, man. Really had a ball.
Thank you, man. Thank you very much.
I'll get this, and I'll get this to you later today. But you have no, really, man. It was you've had a huge impact on my generation, and I think probably for many, many years to come. And my job is to disseminate some of these stories and some of these things that maybe haven't.
You're doing your job very well, very well. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
Bless you, brother. We'll talk soon, okay?
All right, then.
All right, cheers.
Take care.
We'll be right back with Steve.